Good to be all together here.
Yeah.
Rebecca, you want to lead us off here?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm here with two of my favorite docs in the industry that go even further back than I go with them. So I'm super excited to be here with you all and to catch up with Dr. Zach Bush and Dr. Pompa with our webinar today. So our topic is from conflict to harmony, how working with nature can transform health, ecosystems, and the future of humanity. I feel with the story that both of these doctors have, how they're coming together, there's a bit of a golden thread that I feel in this storyline with regenerative agriculture and coming from kind of a medical paradigm and turning to nature as the muse. So I'm hoping to uncover some of this and inspire you all with some forward thinking action and what these two incredible doctors have been up to. So to get started, let's start with transforming health. Dr. Zach, I know, from the beginning, how far back do you and got Dr. Pompa go to start?
I think
Because
it
I
goes
just
back
watched
about,
a video last night that was like two babies beside the Ion Restore warehouse pitching Restore and like the best quick pitch I've heard in a long time. And I'd love to know that story of where you guys met and how far back you both.
we started,
Zach, I can't wait to hear you say that, and I'll say mine.
yeah,
We'll see if they actually even match.
we go back to, it would have been right around 2011, 2012 that we started crossing paths at a lot of the integrative medicine conferences that we circulate through. And so it was around that time. And what was obvious when I met Dr. Pompa is that he and his colleagues were coming out of an education system that had prepared them far better than mine had for the space in which I had met Dr. Pompa in. And so integrative medicine, I was a freaking fledgling little bird that had just been kicked out of the nest of 17 years in academia and had no wings yet when I met these guys. And they were just such a warm group to fall into, and that they gave me a nest to really start asking different questions
Yeah.
and coming up with different answers in a lot of different avenues. So he probably doesn't even know it, but Dr. Pompa had a huge impact on me and allowing me to question a lot of where I came from in my allopathic medical training. And to that end, yeah, I think very few people actually know the rich history of chiropractic medicine and the deep science and really the quantum realities that came out of it was some of the most important channeled information of the 20th century and late 19th century even that really birthed that. So Dr. Palm, you want to give us a little bit of background on
Yeah,
that?
look, I mean, he's right. I mean, the chiropractic philosophy is remove the interference, the body heals. Ironically, I lived that philosophy before I was a chiropractor because of an Italian bricklayer father that I grew up with. That he doctored me, literally, and I didn't even understand why and how, but he learned it in the army, World War II, in the trenches. The medics were not able to get in, and my father kind of just stepped up. He was just a natural. He should have been a doctor. I filled the shoes, but. Zach, that was the first seminar. Like, I mean, Zach taught at one of my seminars early on. He said it exactly right. He was like coming out, of this system, and I'm like, dude, you're one of us. And he's like, who are you all? I mean, we
Yeah.
weren't just chiropractors because, I'm teaching seminars about detox and, people with unexplainable illnesses. And we have MDs, NDs, DCs, and all he saw is this conglomerate of like people that believed what he believed. It's like, he's like, who are you all? And it's like, and I fit in here. And we're like, yeah, man, absolutely. No one heard of Ion. He was talking about it. We were all excited about it because we got the microbiomes connection to the brain. It was early on in all of that. And yeah, but it goes way back to then, 2011. Yeah, that's
It's
it.
amazing. And Zach, you were at that point, well, at one point, with at UVA doing cancer chemotherapy research in a medical lab, looking through a microscope in this medical world that's using big gun medicine, right? When I think of chemotherapy, I think of big guns, right? And then that switch, that transformation into the place of looking more to nature as medicine and this kind of nature dosing. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that bit of journey as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good description of kind of the allopathic training is warfare. Like it's just big gun warfare. We're trained how to move tanks and nuclear weapons into medical care. And so before I got into chemotherapy and all that, I was, helping run ICUs, and in that intensive care unit environment, you've got people who are typically coming in multi-organ failure, and so their lungs have shut down, their liver shut down, their kidneys have failed, vascular system is collapsing. So you're used to seeing like the very end stage of biologic, function. And we have big guns at that point that, are supposed to right that ship. And the slippery slope that happened in those first few years as an internist, as an internal medicine doc in the hospitals, was realizing that my big guns were really pretty impressive at getting a lot of people back out the door that should have looked like they were going to die, and then they didn't. And then 4 weeks later, they were back, and it would take me twice as long to get them out the door the second time, and then get them out the door, and they're back, 6 weeks later or 2 months later, and then they die in the ICU. And starting to realize that, we're spending
Mm.
well over $1 million in the last year of life in American healthcare. And so we're spending these gross amounts of money with diminishing returns. And, most sobering was the diminished quality of life. And so I was seeing patients die on a daily basis. And when you start to witness that as a doctor, and you start to feel the energy in a room where you're at war with death, and death is a failure, and that's what you're being measured against, you run out of hope very quickly, because you quickly understand that no matter how big your gun is, this thing called death is looming for 100% of people. And that was my push towards going to endocrinology and metabolism, realizing that I needed to get further upstream from the end stage of disease. I needed to find something, that was going to be a little bit more preventive in quality. And through that, I discovered nutrition, indirectly. I didn't even know it was really nutrition at the time. I didn't get taught anything about nutrition in medical school, but in my research in endocrinology, I started getting passionate about plant-based diets to reverse diabetes and things like this that were starting to be popularized at the time. And for that, the chemotherapy started to get exciting for me, because I was using vitamin A compounds and realizing that I could feed cancer, and it could eliminate itself if nourished rather than poisoned. And so I thought, this is such an exciting thing. What if we could nourish humanity into health rather than try to poison it to kill the disease, And so is that subtle shift was starting to happen. So this would have been 2005, 2010, where I was starting to go through this transition. And I tried to start a nutrition center for reversing disease at the university. And it was ironically the dietitians that kind of put the kibosh on that, because it wasn't fitting into their teaching, which was kind of based on the food pyramid, and protein was good, carbohydrates are bad, that kind of, dogma was so well baked that it wasn't fitting into that, even though I had 40 years of clinical studies and massive amounts of science. So that what I was doing was that not only evidence-based, but better than any other evidence we had for reversing inflammation. So that led to eventually me kind of getting kicked out of academia from one way or another, to find my way out into private practice, which is one of the loneliest things that can happen when you find yourself suddenly out of the camaraderie of, a big academic center, and now you're alone as a country doc. And I was literally out in the countryside, a town of 550 people serving a county of 40,000 people. I was the only doctor, and it was super isolating. And so when I did meet, Pompa and gang, it was just like oxygen. I just took a deep breath and
Yeah,
was like, there's
we
people
found
out
each
here.
other.
I didn't know there were people out here.
Yeah, I could see Dr. Pompa feeling so much the same. How about you, Dr. Pompa? Like with practice, as far as making an impact and how much you're changing things, can you relate to that?
Yeah, no, totally. Look, the best way to fight a war is prevent one. So you don't need the big missiles if you prevent it, right? And I think we're seeing a shift. I hope. Gosh, we've been, really preparing for this. But, shifts happen. The pendulum swings when it gets so absolutely necessary that it has to. I think that's where we're at as a country. When you look at the statistics, I mean, how did I get here? I mean, back in 1999, I got very sick, unexplainably. It took me from chiropractic to everything I teach. What I brought from chiropractic was that philosophy that I said, remove the interference, the body heals, right? When you look at why we have so much cancer, why we have so much inflammation, heart disease, thyroid conditions, right? It's everything I learned in my sickness. There's certain toxins that being carried in by food Yeah, we have a lot of processed food, part of the problem. It's the toxins that this food is carrying into our bodies that's driving chronic inflammation, it's driving cancer, it's driving all the conditions, the thyroid explosion in the last 20 years. My gosh, I mean, just since post-COVID, it's exploded again. Toxins are driving this. And, so my passion became bringing that message. I got sick for it. I believe it in my heart. When I was literally sick and not knowing the way out, God spoke to my wife. She was on her knees crying out for us, me, and our family. And God spoke to her. Not only is He going to get me well, but I'm going to take a message to the world. And by the way, when she would say that, I never wanted to hear it. I was like, like I can't even get myself well. That's exactly what I would tell her. But here I am. I strongly believe, God taught me everything to be a voice of what the world needs right now. And that's why Zach and I met early on, because we're both
It's
voicing it right
amazing.
now.
It's
I love the
amazing.
hearts. Thank you.
I think about too, like when we were talking about, medicine as a bomb, I think the same thing has happened, so often I compare our medical system and our food system, right? Because they go hand in hand. And the bombs that we put on our land, we talk a lot about glyphosate exposure, through farming, and
Yeah.
a lot of this poison is what kind of breaks apart that cellular wall, that membrane that blocks those toxins from your body, and your body becomes the sponge, right? So
Yep.
that's where we look at a lot of that breakdown. And glyphosate started as one of the first patents as like a metal chelator, right? It was like a metal chelator. So it strips minerals from the soil, it strips minerals from our
Horrible.
body, right? Our
Yeah.
plants that we eat, that's where we get our minerals from, and the plants get the minerals from the soil. So if they're lacking from the soil, the plants and the fruit, the vegetables don't have that mineral content. And I've been thinking too, even about the inputs that we put in these big monocrops. And there's like three, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus in massive
Oh,
amounts. Three minerals out of 60 essential minerals is what we're monocropping our soil with as well.
so look at the problem, right?
Yeah.
We've stripped away the nutrients, right? Glyphosate is part of that and more. So now we have plants that aren't the way they should be to nourish our bodies, right? Because of the soil. Oh, and then it gets worse. Then because they're weak plants, then we spray them with a bunch of chemicals. This is just brilliant. It's like someone couldn't plan up a better plan to make the world sick, right? It's like, so then we put all these chemicals, one of which opens up the protective barrier, as you pointed out, right? It was a 2012 study. I remember Stephanie Seneff, she was one of the first, right? Now there's been others, but that shown this glyphosate is opening up these protective barrier, the gut barrier, the blood-brain barrier, allowing these chemicals then that we're exposed to and already have in our bodies that bioaccumulated to cross deeper. And then all the graphs, right? Nancy Swanson graphs, right? You can Google them online. Look at glyphosate in autism, look at glyphosate in diabetes, glyphosate in Parkinson's. I mean, you name the condition, there's a correlation, as in the 90s that, glyphosate went up and all these conditions go up. And it's working in this perfect storm with all the other chemicals, right? Zach, I don't even know if you saw this, but what's happening right now is like, they're literally using aluminum and other chemicals like even bromine to make jet fuel more efficient.
Mhm.
Okay, so they're saving millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars. However, aluminum is literally falling down into our plants, our water systems, and aluminum being the second most abundant thing in soil, right? It's like it's
Mhm.
in the Earth's crust. It literally, the acid rain that we're causing is separating aluminum off. So now we have this massive aluminum exposure, not to mention the mercury exposure, then glyphosate that allows it to cross deeper. I mean, come on, go figure. How are we so sick? Really?
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful things that we've learned over time is that life is miraculous. That when you look at the weight of toxicity that we've put into the soil and water systems, food systems at large over the last, really even before glyphosate. Glyphosate came along at a time where we're using a ton of atrazine and atrazine was known carcinogen. And so the idea was
Yeah.
like, oh, well, at least we don't have to spray atrazine.
Makes male frogs female too, right? It's like, right.
Exactly, yeah. And so now we're using atrazine as the number one chemical input again because glyphosate's not working because everything's glyphosate resistant weeds again. So we're back to atrazine again, and now we're doing glyphosate, atrazine, 2,4-D, and LibertyLink all on the same crop. So we've got three drug and five chemical GMO crops now going in. And so when you look at that, and then you consider the fact that we've survived to date, it speaks to this resilience. It's just almost unbelievable that any of us are alive.
I
That any
say it
of us
all the
are
time.
a child. Yeah.
It is a testament to the human body God's created, isn't
Yeah.
it? It
It's
really
incredible.
is.
It's miraculous that you can put this much downward pressure on life and life continues to try to be resilient is something spectacular. And we get to see that in our lab all the time, so much so that, in the discoveries we made that nature wanted to show us through, the soil systems, which was back in 2011, 12, before I had even gotten this stuff into a bottle, we were starting to show the science of how fossil soil systems predating any human interaction had a level of communication that was restoring cell comms. And when you restore information in a cell, it has an unbelievable capacity to repair and regenerate.
That's right.
And so we were realizing at the time that a cell with unfettered access to information is bulletproof. And that's true for glyphosate and all these other chemicals. We were exposing ourselves to really high levels of these, but as long as it had the soil communication network, we couldn't believe the resilience. And so we started to really trust at that point, and it's only doubled down every year since, that nature's actually never allowed an injury that she didn't already have a solution for. And that solution lies deep within her own intelligence of biochemical and bionutrient connectivity. And so it's through connected systems that she has all the solutions. And that's where we started to fail in the late 1800s when we started going to really large scale monocropping. And so wheat and sugar really went bonkers in 1870s to 1900. And so we were seeing this degradation of soil systems and, life force within soil way before, 100 years before we had glyphosate on the thing. And it was because of the same problem, which we weren't understanding that complex systems is the foundation of everything. We were going to mononutrients, monocropping, all of this. And so that degradation led to the Dust Bowl. We had a complete collapse of all the soil systems in the United States by, the 20s. And so we had towns that by the early 30s were buried in drifts of dust because we had lost the soil matrix from overplowing. Even before chemical input, we had overplowed and failed to do biodiverse crop management. And so it's every time we move away from diversity, we end up with direct and equal consequences at the biologic level. And this is where, I think academia can fail as well, or any social system can fail, is that when your dinner table starts to look like the same five people over and over again, actually increase the amount of stress, because the second law of thermodynamics is any system left in isolation increases its entropy or chaos. And so whether it's the dinner table or a farm field or a society's large food system, when you decrease the number of connections, you lose life. And all the blue zones have shown us the secret is not their food, it's not their religion, it's always how many generations are connected around the dinner table, like how many people are daily interacting across generations and how much new input do you get into that family unit. And so the Icary of Greece has the famous thing is we never ask each other, what did you eat last night? But we always ask, who did you get to eat with last night? They're trying to find that diversity of community. And so whether it be in our own households, in our own backyards with our gardens versus, Kentucky bluegrass, which is the third largest crop grown in the United States, is 40 million acres of backyard lawns. 40 million acres of backyard lawn doing nothing but basically, destroying ecosystem, resilience and diversity, leaching out water tables, putting in tons of, homeowners use more chemical per acre than any farmer in the world does. And so we're part of this poisoning of the world in our own isolationism. And the fact that we put up a white picket fence and then own that and, don't let anybody in our yard, that's our guarantee that we're going to have a collapsing society within, decades. So it's this real beauty that we're realizing is, wow, this is a super simple equation. We got to connect everything again. We got to go to interconnected systems. And for that, I think Dr. Pompa and I have had a lot of joy working in this space. Is when we go to conferences that are in this space, I'm usually working with a lot of people that would never went to medical school, and they're offering me a whole lot of insights from their perspective. And I would say the majority of people that have companies in this space rarely even have a science background, but they have an illness background. and they got sick, just like Dr. Pompa did. And then they found their way out. And in finding their way out, they found an element of nature that they're excited to be, sharing with the world. And so that's led to a biodiverse ecosystem of academic, interest or, intellectual property that's brewing in this kind of outside of the medical system intelligence that's been brewing. And I think it's really for that biodiversity that we see such unique genius and unique, tools coming to be that could have never come out of a University of Virginia laboratory, because the questions they're asking aren't even understood to a typical medical doc. And so they're really brilliant in that connectivity. So the same thing that I've come to trust in soil is the same thing I trust in our medical community as we get more and more diverse.
Pain to purpose brings the answers.
Yeah. And with that regenerative, farming and that bringing in the inputs, you're like building back the biome in the soil, like building back the community, the interconnectedness in the soil. I know Dr. Pompa, you've been doing some recent work with regenerative agriculture and with your supplement line as well in communication. Would love to hear what you found in the field there and what you've been working on in brewing.
What we did, we take mushrooms. To Zach's point, right? We didn't plan this.
Communication.
Yeah. But what do mushrooms do? They actually connect all kingdoms, right? If there's 7 kingdoms of living things on the planet, mushrooms are the only one that connect them all. The mycelium that literally runs under the earth, literally. This is amazing, right? But so many people saw the movie. I can't remember.
Fantastic fungi.
Fantastic Fungi,
Oh,
right?
so
It was
good.
the first movie to, I think it was the graphics, right? But
Oh,
it
I
showed,
love it.
it showed literally a tree. You can have a tree that literally spawns another tree miles and miles away, and it still stays in communication with that tree. How? Literally the mycelium, the mushroom communication network under the ground. It's amazing. And then it communicates with other organisms via the same communication network. So that's what mushrooms and mycelium do. And what else do? They literally, they grow on things, and then they make it more bioavailable to other kingdoms and nature, right? That's what mushrooms do. And here's a great example. So what we did, we took mushrooms and we grew it on different substrates, meaning different herbs, different plants. And what it would do is it would pull up these active ingredients that look amazing in a petri dish when you're doing a study. If you use turmeric as an example, right? But most of those really aren't that active in the body or at all at the cellular level, right? But you pull a mushroom, you let a mushroom grow on it, and then it makes it bioavailable. And then we eat the mushroom and we get a benefit that we would never get by eating that substrate plant or whatever it is. And a great example of that is, so this is a cool story, but they discovered something in a birch tree in the lab that was very easy to access in a birch tree. And it had amazing properties against cancer cells, bad cells in the body. The problem is when they gave it to humans or living things, it didn't translate, didn't work. Years of trying to figure it out, never figured it out. Now, a gentleman who was not part of that research, but knew of it, he was studying chaga mushroom, different, not even connected. And he found that ingredient in the chaga. And he thought, I wonder if it would be active in human cells. As it turned out, it did. He made a lot of money because the mushroom that grow on the birch extracted it, made it bioavailable to humans. And that's just one example, right? But so that's what we did. So what we do in the product line, it's called Cellular Solutions. The only reason I developed it, I've developed a lot of product for other people, but it was really around this concept because we're dealing with people who are very sick and challenged, who have trouble assimilating foods in their gut, but also even at the cellular level because they have so much cellular inflammation. So we needed very bioavailable active ingredients. We're already dealing with bad soil and bad guts. So by doing this process, what we do is we match the mushroom. For mushrooms have an affinity for certain cells of the body. For example, lion's mane loves the brain cells, has an affinity for the brain cells and the gut. So those two cell receptors it does very well with. So for those products, gut products, brain products, we would take lion's mane and then we grow it on something that we want to utilize the function. So if we're trying to de-inflame the brain or the gut, we're going to grow it on something like turmeric, or maybe it's ginger, peppermint, but we're growing it on something to drive a function and deliver it with that mushroom set. So each product has a specific mushroom. Each product is utilizing different substrates to drive a specific function. That's at the core of the product line. And then to take it otherwise, most of the ingredients are also grown on a regenerative farm. And that's a good friend of mine, Jordan Rubin, which he supplies that. But we're taking it off the regenerative farm because we're trying to get things that are grown in good soil. And therefore, then now we're taking a turmeric grown in this soil, and very different than an organic turmeric grown in a really good soil, right? But if you take one grown in good soil and then do that process, now we have something absolutely fabulous.
I had seen a little clip, Dr. Pompa, about the mushroom body, like the medicinal that it's grown on. It takes on like visual characteristics of it or something.
Yeah,
Like
no, it's pretty amazing when you grow it on
yeah.
something like turmeric. It literally, you see the yellows and the oranges. If we grow some on different grape skins, right? And we pull up like resveratrol, and all these ingredients, and you see it pulled up into the mushroom, takes on the characteristics. Yeah,
That blows my mind. It's like nature, like that mimicry. So like talking about communication, like I get chills because it's like nature, it's like the bridge of communication between, it's like expressing.
Yeah, they're the
what it's
great
being grown on.
communicators. Yeah,
It's so
they are the great
cool.
communicators. And again, the whole purpose of it is what's happening in nature. We're mimicking what's in nature, right? All we're doing is the mushroom has this, we'll never figure it out, an ability to make things bioavailable, right? Into other kingdoms, in this case, humans. So that's the cool thing.
I think for Ion, it had a similar thing in that, like bringing communication from the soil. We started seeing miracles with that before we understood, I think, what was actually happening.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so ion is basically the small carbon molecules that move through the fiber optic cables of mycelium. And so the way in which the cable moves information is like, it's basically functions as a liquid circuit board. And so the same way that circuit board is transitioning a lot of electrical information through little switches, I's and O's, same thing's happening to that mycelium network via these carbon molecules that can carry that electrical charge via the hydrogen that bonds to it. And so this is the thing coursing through it. And so as we started working with it, we couldn't figure out how it was doing so many things. It didn't make sense that it could do absolutely everything you wanted a cell to do. And if it was a damaged cell, the cell suddenly knew how to eliminate the itself. It was too damaged to repair. So it was creating a level of intelligence at the cellular level that we just had simply never seen before. We thought we had to do things to cells to have a positive influence. It's the first product on the market that really intends to do nothing, and instead just empower the cells to have enough information that they exhibit their own intelligence. And that's been a humbling thing to realize, just the micromanagement that I was taught in medical school is really the last thing that nature is asking for. She wasn't waiting for Homo sapiens to come on as 4 billion years into her iterative process of beauty and then say, oh, good, humans showed up to make it, to improve this process. So I think for me, it's just been that really humbling thing of the divine plan of nature is stacking functions of complexity via diversity. And so when you put the communication network back in there, it's searching out those opportunities for collaboration and building those opportunities. And the subtlety of this is something that I love about what Dr. Pompa's doing and the rest, is that for the last 50 years, the supplement industry has really hung its hat on the missile approach to nutrient delivery. 10,000 units of something, 50,000 grams of this, and I have more vitamin D than you have. It's been like this pissing match of who has more of nutrients. And then you take a glance over at nature, like, holy cow, she's never done that. She has never megadosed anything to anybody. Protein powder, no, she doesn't do that. Like she's always after the whole story, which is an interconnected intelligence. And so she wants the fiber and the carbohydrates and the proteins and all of the micronutrients in there, that she wants the whole freaking periodic chart to be involved in any element of what she does. And it's for the subtlety of those interactions that we actually get life to occur. And so the whole supplement industry is desperately needing a complete shutdown and reinvention. We need to stop megadosing people. And we've known that we were doing harm since 2010, 2012 with the Women's Health Initiative study, Women on a multivitamin. These are USP multivitamins. These are the classic, like lots of vitamin B, lots of C, lots of things.
Prenatals.
Prenatals, 9% increase in mortality in women taking a multivitamin versus those that were not. That's worse outcomes than smoking. And so yet there was absolutely no change of behavior in the industry, doctors, anything else. And so we've known that megadosing is harmful, yet there hasn't been another solution or another offering. And that's where we're excited about this nature dosing that we've been able to demonstrate in the lab. Is the way in which nature delivers things is through these tiny micronutrient sources that are already balanced for us. So we don't need to guess at which curcuminoid, anti-inflammatory is best for the body. The curcumin already figured out that relationship. And so instead we suspend the entire, plant system into that carbon matrix and that communication network. And now you've got the beauty of both communication and delivery happening at the same time, which is how the mycelium work. They've shown in farms, for example, you can have a farm field with a bunch of different crops, and some of them have magnesium and manganese deficiencies, and all you do is dump a bunch of complex compost and fertilizer in one corner of the farm, and then the mycelium will hear what everything needs and move it to the appropriate source.
Yeah.
And so the mycelium network is both the communication and the delivery system for trace nutrients. And what we're showing in our laboratory now is that when you suspend something like curcumin into the ion substrate, you can get 3,000 nanograms per milliliter in the urine within 30 minutes. If you do like a high grade liposomal curcumin, there's 0 detectable in the urine. And so it's, megadosing something into a liposome still isn't what nature is looking for. Nature is looking for these trace qualities of delivery, and then she can just suck it up at levels you can't even really calculate.
And a liposome only helps it across the gut, right? After that, it's people think it's bringing it into the cell. It's not. It's absolutely not.
Yeah.
So you're both really like tapping into that like mode of delivery, like the way in which our body receives the information is important. It's not just dumping that molecule or whatever it is like into your gut and like you're going to be fine. It's actually in the way that your body perceives it in that delivery.
No, because we resonate on it. Nature does it best. We can only happen upon it. It's like, oh wow, this is how it's working. And to his point, it's not the nuclear weapon, right? It's just not. It's nature has it figured out in a perfect balance, and we probably, God willing, we discover more, but nature's got it. I always enjoyed this story, Zach. It's probably worth telling, just how ion, how you ended up stumbling into it, right? It's I think it's it happened to the right guy. It wasn't by accident. It was brought to Zach. But tell that story.
Yeah, so my chemotherapy was focused on cell signaling in mitochondria, and so I was utilizing fractions of vitamin A compounds to increase cellular signaling through a process called redox chemistry, which is this communication network that we're discussing here. And so the redox system of mitochondria is oxygen based, and so mitochondria are able to consolidate so much solar energy inside of a cell because it's breaking apart the double carbon bonds through a respiratory cycle. Bacteria and other single-celled organisms, bacteria, fungi, and the like, they have to ferment materials to get the double carbon bonds to break and release energy or sunlight. And so we had been doing fermentation on the planet for billions of years, and then along comes the mitochondria as an innovation of, wow, if we put one of these inside a cell, it can get so much more energy out because it's starting to use oxygen as a respiratory tool for breaking apart carbons. So that was where my chemotherapy was like, how fun, like we can actually give back a nutrient that allows the cell to do what it used to do before the mitochondria got damaged. So a cancer cell becomes cancerous when it no longer has enough energy to repair. And that's due to a lack of mitochondrial reservoir inside of that cancer cell. And so like Dr. Pompa was saying, there's so many toxins in our general environment now that all will hit the mitochondrial membrane. And so we're having this antimicrobial effect, not just on the microbiome of the gut, but of the microbiome inside our cells, which is the mitochondria. And so for 50 years, we've been seeing this decrease in metabolic function within the human cell. And for that, we start to see disease emerge. And so if you ask the question, does glyphosate cause cancer? The reason they've gotten away with saying no is because it doesn't do the classical thing of breaking double-stranded DNA, which is like what radiation does. And so because we have 50-year-old antiquated definitions of what causes a carcinogen, we keep getting away with saying, oh no, it doesn't cause cancer. Anything that decreases the mitochondrial membrane potential is going to increase not just cancer, but every disease. And so this is the paper that we're about to release. Excuse me. This is the paper that we're about to release, is the exact mechanisms by which glyphosate disrupts the mitochondrial membrane to decrease ATP production, decrease the electron flow out of the respiratory cycle. And for that, we get to, finally show the smoking gun of what happened in 1976, as we started dimming the lights on humanity at that point. And for that, diseases started to appear. And the dimmer we got, the more vicious those diseases got. And so that's basically the pattern we've been on now for the last 50 years.
By the way, Otto Warburg showed this at the turn of the 19th century, that it was literally, he talked about this ancient primitive glycolysis that was happening because toxins affect on the mitochondria and how it produced energy and how it couldn't produce enough energy, trying to save its life, the cell, and it would go into this primitive form of glycolysis and this form all this lactic acid, etc. And he talked about it, and how toxins affected one fatty acid in the mitochondrial membrane and how it makes energy through that membrane, cardiolipin. Anyways, that was early 19th century. No one listened, unfortunately. Here we're proving it out still.
I think I think that was an interesting thing. And I think it's a warning to us, is that there was a divide happening in the scientific community at that point, kind of 1920s to 1940s. And so this is when people like Royal Rife came along, and a lot of scientists were doing some radically cool things, looking at disease completely differently than we had before, starting to understand it as a field effect instead of a problem with the species. Like, it wasn't the human getting disease, it was a lack of the field or environment around the human that was starting to fail. And so that would have been one option for us to pursue. Instead, we took the hard right turn towards a technologic solution rather than a biologic reconnection. If we'd gone down the biologic reconnection route, we'd have a completely different human history than we have today.
Money determined that.
Money determined it, but I think we would have had a lot of money the other direction too. Like, in some ways, it was just I think that ultimately what determined it was it's a deep abandonment disorder that we carry in our human psyche. We think we got kicked out of nature, and we think nature is against us. And for that, the promise of a technologic solution rather than a biologic solution felt much more secure. And so monetary, yes, but it fit what the human was feeling inside so well when we said, oh, here's a drug that will help you. That fit because it felt like our bodies were out of control. We thought that we had, germs were attacking us and nature was against us, and the immune system was out to sterilize the human body. So we had this warlike mentality. And so it was very easy for the drug companies to come along to give us this external solution because we had failed to trust the internal realities. And so I think it was a psychological vulnerability that then got exploited by, some of the special interests and stuff like that. But until we solve that, we're actually not going to change our behavior. And this is what Dr. Pompa and I see all the time, is patients come into every form of medicine, whether functional medicine, allopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine. People come in looking for external solutions. And the longer they look for external solutions, they're not going to find that their cure. It's not until they settle into the fact that healing is going to come from within. And like Dr. Pompa was saying, this is the whole concept of chiropractic: is remove all the interference around you, and you'll find self. And that's what our Journey of Intrinsic Health, program does now. And our 8-week program starts in the first week of just getting rid of all of the static around your self identity. And we see people healing before we've done anything, change their nutrition, fasting, all the fancy stuff we do later. They're already healing way ahead of that because they simply removed the beliefs about who they were, and they simply became themselves for a moment. And that crystal clarity of our self-identity is what knit us together in the womb in the first place. Nobody had to reassure you as a zygote, oh, keep going, you're doing a good job, just 70 trillion more cells and you'll self-organize. There's a confidence in nature that she knows what she's doing at every level. That first cell knew exactly what it was going to do. How, we don't really know, because it's not programmed at the DNA that it's going to become a human, because the DNA is really the same as a pig. So how does it really understand? This is an energetic phenomenon that's imprinted in what we might call a soul instead of in the genetics. And so we have an energetic imprint that biology is mapping to in the womb. And if I can knit myself together with 10 fingers and 10 toes with no instruction manual and nobody explaining to me that my identity is different than Dr. Pompa's identity. There's some magic going on there that we've got to lean back into, is we are divine beings that know self-identity at a level that allows us to knit ourselves together in the womb. And that's the trust where I now go with every day in the clinic or otherwise, is wow, that's a lot to trust.
Absolutely. And we've got several communities that both of you have to help pull together. We're talking about biome and soil and biome and food, and we have a whole mycelium network really between us. Zach mentioned the journey of intrinsic health. So that's a wonderful community to join and be a part of. I know Dr. Pompa also has health centers where he works with practitioners and training practitioners through health centers. Zach, I've seen you also mention Farmers Footprint lately and Project Biome. Do you want to mention anything about Project Biome or Farmers Footprint?
We spawned these projects out of our for-profit entity, and so we started funding a film project back in 2017 that would become the foundation for these nonprofits. And and the vision was that, you know, nature knows how to heal herself, just as this, and she's not waiting for humans to go heal the planet. And so with interest and curiosity of how is she going to heal this wound that humanity's inflicting on her, and what is she arranging to create that? So Project Biome is that listening tool of, let's listen into nature and see her macro cycles. What happens every 200,000 years? What happens every 20,000 years? Where do we fit into that cycle? And it turns out that we are right on the verge of another explosion of greening of the planet. 1/3 of the planet currently is under desert. We know it as the Sahara. We know it as the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, North India, Siberia, northern China. 1/3 of the planet is desert. And it's easy to look at that global map and be like, of course, Sahara desert has always been Sahara Desert. Well, it wasn't the Sahara Desert. 1,000 years ago, that was the most verdant area of Europe, and it was feeding all of Europe. The Roman Empire took over all of North Africa, and was, you know, Alexandria was the biggest city in the world at the time, and it was the hub of food commerce coming out of what's now the Sahara Desert, was some of the richest soils on the earth. And so that cycle happens every 20,000 years, and we're now at a nadir where the desert's gotten to its kind of maximum level, or is nearing that, and is ready to do this regenerative cycle back into the largest grasslands in the world and the rest. So backing up in humility, and instead of just having the anthropocentric view of like, we're doing all the damage, so therefore we need to fix it, we can back up and say, how is nature going to, you know, adapt? Because she always does. She doesn't mind extinctions, it seems. Everything always gets better, more complex, more ecosystem diversity, more intelligence, more beauty. So she's obviously not seeing a problem. What is she doing to do that? And so Project Biome is understanding that, wow, with some very simple interventions, regenerative agriculture, rewilding of rivers and coastlines with keystone species, and reconnected bioregional economies, where we stop, you know, creating vulnerability and poverty for long trade chains and fiscal policy of a couple of G8 countries. Instead, we create this stability in these relationships back to nature that have been there since the beginning of time. This is how 40,000 years in North America supported 615 nations, 100 million people were thriving in North America with complex food systems. They had, you know, food forests everywhere. They had complex systems of agriculture and water management that have been going on for tens of thousands of years. And then the Europeans show up and devastate the entire environment with a monoculture belief. It's like not the ecosystem providing for us. We need to control the ecosystem. So it's very, very recent, just in the last couple 100 years, that we wiped out North America. And then we exported that belief through artificial economies to the whole world. And so Project Biome's excited that the nature's already recovering. She's already doing her thing. And if we get out of the way for a moment and we realign industry, NGOs, nonprofits, instead of running around terrifying everybody that, you know, climate change is here and climate crisis, like, no, she's about to take her next breath. How do we help support that next breath that will pull that CO2 into the grasslands of North Africa? And we suddenly have just a different planet than we learned in elementary school very quickly. So that's the big Project Biome thing. And the first project within that was our regen, you know, systems project called Farmers Footprint. And it was named so because of a Japanese proverb that says that the best fertilizer for a garden is the farmer's footprint. And so it's a recognition that as soon as we walk back on Mother Earth again, with the understanding that she's going to nurture us and provide for us, the whole thing writes itself. Like that's all we have to do, is trust that there's a mother, and trust that we're going to be nourished by that mother, because it's been nourishing life on this planet since its origin. And so this transition from control and fear and guilt and shame about our behavior to a quick realignment, regenerative, rewilding, reconnected economies line up and become part of the solution. And so Farmers Footprint is understanding how every single household can be part of that solution by turning your backyard gardens back into a food forest and start to provide there. So take our garden club. We got other resources there as far as our community network and everything else that can help start plugging you into how you become part of this solution in your backyards and start really motivating us to do something different at the regulatory level, at the legislative level, to come into alignment with food independence.
Yeah, I think that's what's so exciting. Seeing Joel Salatin be chosen to be on this advisory for USDA, and he's real big in regenerative agriculture. He's in our backyard here in Virginia, and we visited his farm and had an amazing tour. And it's so refreshing to know that that voice is going to be at that legislative level. I know that it gives me a lot of hope, and I feel, having a teenage daughter coming up at this time, like, and then I go to Dr. Pompa's, line for such a time as this, coming back to this place. It's like, I feel like I wasn't called to this place for like the technological place that we're going, but more to be that story keeper and that wisdom keeper of that connection with nature, and how important it is for this next generation that we keep those stories and that we keep connecting and reconnecting right now, because I feel like it could so quickly be lost. And that's the way, right? That's like the way to invest back into their future, is also to bring back that connection, and starting in your own backyard. Yeah.
Dr. Pompa, thank you for being who you are. Really appreciate just the journey that we've had in parallel and weaving together over these years. It's been wonderful to watch your wisdom affect the world, and it's just been real pleasure to watch the journey and how many practitioners you've reached through your programs with Revolution and everything else has been phenomenal. And so I'm very grateful for the weave.
Well, I appreciate it. Look, I always say I didn't choose it. It chose me. So here I am serving in it for such a time as this, Rebecca, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we're in unique times. I have a lot of hope right now, more than I have in a long, long time. I see a shift, as you're saying, in many things, but it starts with our beliefs, right? Changes our thoughts, right? Our thoughts, our words, our habits, our actions, and all the way down to where, we change our destiny, right? So, yeah, I think it's we're in a great place.
Well, I love what an inspiration you are to so many people as well, and give so much hope and direction and assistance there to motivate people and how they can improve their lives and make big changes. For everyone, we'll be following up with you all with some great links to everything that we've discussed today, with Farmers Footprint in Joya to Cellular Solutions and Dr. Pompa's Health Centers for Practitioners. So, I encourage everyone to find a community, right? And to really, start planting your gardens. Now is actually a great time to put in a winter garden, some greens and leafy greens for those who love green juices. But reconnect with us, stay connected. We'll be sending this recording out December 5th is when it's slated. But if you have any questions, you can direct questions for Zach and the ION team to info@intelligenceofnature.com, or for Dr. Pompa and Cellular Solutions to info@cellularsolutions.com. So that's really easy to remember, and we'll be in touch. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Zach and Dr. Pompa, for coming together. It was so fun to spend this time with you and bring an old crew back.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Zach.
Take care, y'all.
Thank you. Bye, guys.